At 7:43 in the morning, my cabin door nearly came off its hinges. Karen, the HOA president, was pounding like she had a warrant, clipboard raised like a weapon. But the moment my wife walked out in full military uniform, medals blazing in the sunlight, Karen froze. That was the second I knew this wasn't just HOA nonsense. This was war. Act 1. The conflict begins. I should probably start with this. Our place isn't much, just a cabin by the lake, a dock, a shed that leans a little in the wind. It's quiet, peaceful. Or it was, until Karen decided to make it her personal battlefield. I opened the door, coffee still in hand. And there she is, hair scraped into a bun so tight it looks painful, face red like she's about to blow a gasket. And the clipboard, always the clipboard, she launches into a tirade before I can even say good morning. Unauthorized structures, unauthorized flags, suspicious activities. I almost laughed. Suspicious activities sounded like she thought we were running a bootleg operation out of a fishing shack. But Karen didn't do humor. She steamrolled over anything I said, her voice sharp enough to cut the air. Then came the sound of footsteps behind me, measured, heavy. My wife stepped into the doorway, short, dark hair still damp from the shower, eyes calm, unreadable. And she wasn't in jeans or a sweatshirt. She was in full military dress uniform, medals shining, posture so sharp it could have drawn blood. Karen actually stopped mid-breath. Her eyes flicked from the medals to the polished jacket, and for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't know what to say. My wife's voice was cool, steady. Is there a reason you're beating on our door like you're breaching it? Karen muttered something about coming back with paperwork, spun on her heel, and stomped to her SUV. Gravel sprayed as she drove off. I was still trying to process the whole scene when my wife leaned close and whispered, "She knows exactly who I am." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about lawn regulations. It was personal. Act 2. Escalation and the turning point. The next day, Karen came back with a sidekick, some so-called compliance officer whose main talent was folding his arms and nodding at everything Karen said. They marched up the driveway, announcing they were there for an informal inspection. Before I could protest, the door opened again, and there was my wife back in uniform, cap tucked under her arm, medals flashing. She didn't raise her voice, didn't even frown. She just said, "Any inspection requires 72 hours notice in writing. Otherwise, it's trespassing." The compliance guy practically shrank. Karen muttered something about just doing our jobs and slunk back to her SUV, but I knew she wouldn't stop. Sure enough, later that week, a fat envelope landed in our mailbox. Karen's official violation list. Dozens of accusations, unauthorized flag, our service banner, unauthorized gathering me and Ray, my neighbor, talking about catfish on the dock, unauthorized maintenance, the 2 rotting boards I replaced on the shed so I wouldn't break my ankle. And the kicker, possible military drills on HOA property, and which turned out to be a grainy photo of my wife showing me how not to throw out my back hauling a kayak. I felt my stomach drop. It was ridiculous, but the list was long enough to scare anyone, and that's when the doubt hit me. That night, I slumped at the table, staring at the papers. "Maybe we should just move," I said quietly. "Sell the place. Cut our losses. It's not worth this." I actually meant it. For a moment, I wanted to give up. My wife didn't answer right away. She just sipped her coffee, eyes sharp as glass. Then she looked at me and said, "That's exactly what she wants." The next day, Ray knocked on our window, voice low, "Watch your backs." And he warned, "Karen's making calls, meeting people at night, waving papers around like she struck gold." Not long after, headlights paused outside our gate. Same black SUV, license plate conveniently unavailable. And then Mac showed up, my wife's old army buddy. Big guy, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, grin that said he'd seen worse. He sat at our table, flipped through Karen's packet, and pulled out his own, a manila folder with developer contracts, property lists, and our lot number, highlighted with a star. Next to it, pressure strategy recommended. It clicked. Karen wasn't just being petty. She was working with the developer, trying to force us out so they could scoop up lakeside lots. That was the turning point. We weren't victims anymore. We had proof. And my wife, she was done playing defense. Act 3. The showdown. The special HOA hearing was set for Friday night. Community center, rows of folding chairs, the smell of burnt coffee in the air. Karen sat at the center of the board table. Chin high, papers stacked like fortifications. She launched into her speech, parading blown-up photos on an easel. The flag, the lock, the kayak. She spoke like she was unveiling national secrets. Then it was our turn. My wife walked to the podium, leather folder in hand, posture straight as steel. And calmly, methodically, she dismantled every single accusation. The flag, protected by state law and HOA bylaws. The lock and camera, within the rules, word for word. The gathering, Ray's notarized statement proved it was two guys talking about fishing. The military drill, a back-saving kayak demonstration. The room chuckled. Even the compliance officer smirked. Karen's jaw tightened. But my wife wasn't finished. She laid out the developer connection documents, photos, emails, even produced a statement from a retired colonel about ethical governance, his ribbons gleaming as he spoke. Then Mac's affidavit, showing this same pattern in other neighborhoods. And then, the final blow. A photo. Karen, sitting in a cafe with the developer's associate. An envelope sliding across the table. Timestamp clear as day. The room went dead silent. Board members shifted. Neighbors leaned forward. Karen tried to shout about context, but nobody was buying it. The board president finally spoke. Given this evidence, we call for an emergency vote. The motion to uphold Karen's violations died instantly. The motion to remove her as president passed. Karen's face cracked. Her hand shook as she gathered her papers. She stood, heels clicking sharp against the floor, and walked out without looking at anyone. The sound of that door closing behind her was louder than any gavel.
Sir.
Closing line. And just like that, the clipboard lost its power because the truth weighed more than all her rules combined.